What is up, beautiful people? I am back. Welcome to another episode of The Coach's Quarters. I apologize for the long delay. I had the flu for about 2 weeks, and then I had no voice for about 2.5. So I could not confidently put out a show. You couldn't understand anything I was saying, and it was awful. But I am finally back. I am feeling mostly better outside of my ear that is still a little funky, but I am back. And I'm so excited to be back because this is going to be a pretty cool show. However, moving forward, the shows are going to get a little bit better. So I've got 2 little pieces of small information to give to all of my listeners and all of my fans. So one, I just moved a roommate in with me. His name is none other than Joey McGinnis, a guy that I had on the show previously. And he is very excited to quote unquote co-host with me moving forward for the most part. Unfortunately, that guy has the flu right now. We were planning on launching our duo this week. That looks like it is not going to happen. That guy is at the urgent care right now. So it is going to be just me tonight, but here soon, you will have a duo. We'll have a little banter. It'll be a little easier to liquidly move through all of these topics. And it'll be 2 separate perspectives that it should open the show up a little bit. The second big thing is kind of a pending deal. However, it looks like the Coach's Quarters is going to hit the road and we will be back in Vegas in 2024. I know all of you that listened to me when I was on the Mean Gene show, and then when I helped launch the Picks RN show with Mr. Picks himself, we had a lot of stuff going on in Vegas. I was flying out once a month. That's where our shows were being filmed. They're in the lobby of the Virgin Hotel. Shout out to the Virgin Hotel and Casino. Well, it looks like I may be returning under the TCQ brand. I cannot wait to bring you guys shows from Las Vegas. I will be doing work, hopefully, with the Mean Gene show once again. And again, I should be able to bring my brand with me on the road, and it'll be a really, really cool experience to kind of market the Coach's Quarters there in Sin City. So that's pretty neat. That's 2 things that have really come up over the last couple of weeks while I've been down in the dumps. I've wanted to put out, some sort of a message, but again, you couldn't understand a word I was saying. I had no voice. I sounded like Mickey Mouse for a couple of weeks. So here you are, straight from the horse's mouth. I should be back in Vegas starting in 2024, and I absolutely cannot wait to bring you heathens this show from Sin City. With that being said, we are going to kind of fire into some content, right? It's going to be kind of a sad show today. Not really, but kind of. We're going to go over some of the coach firings that have happened since my last show. I know that I talked about McDaniels getting canned from Las Vegas, but we're going to pick up from there. Got a couple of things to hit on at that spot. I'm going to touch on the NFL hot seat, coaches that I think we could see moved probably after the season is over, but coaches that I can't imagine sticking around any longer, which kind of sucks because I like some of the names on the list. We are going to give you a rundown on the Texans. I'm not going to hit too much on the weeks that I have missed. Most of y'all are Texans fans, and y'all watch the games, and you kind of know what's happened. But I've got a couple of notes and things that I've seen and observed, and really been able to pick apart in my time away, all the way up to this previous game where we beat the Denver Broncos. #Go Texans. And then we are going to wrap up with a couple of, interesting pieces around the league, things that have happened, kind of ramifications of what happened, and then a brief path to the playoffs for teams that are either on the bubble or loosely in the wild card slot right now. So we're going to run through all of that. Hopefully this show doesn't drag on too long. However, I've been gone for 3 weeks, so you guys can put up with it. It should be a good one. We're gonna have quite a bit of content, and I'm so happy to be back that I could put out a 2-hour show, even though none of you would listen to the whole thing. So, with that being said, we are going to jump right in. Woo! All right, so we're gonna jump off with coach firings. Right, McDaniels gets canned at the Raiders. A couple weeks later, Frank Reich with the Carolina Panthers gets canned. He lost his job on November 27th. There's been a lot of turmoil with this move. I myself don't necessarily believe that Frank Reich was the problem. However, there are alleged rumors that are out that Frank Reich wanted CJ Stroud. David Tepper, the owner, wanted Bryce Young. And because Stroud is firmly in the lead for offensive player of the year or offensive rookie of the year, it looks like he might actually get a couple of MVP votes. He's more than likely not going to get the MVP, but it does look like he should garner some MVP votes. Tepper decided to do what the Panthers brass is best at and point fingers at people that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. He cans Frank Reich because Frank Reich can't win games with Bryce Young despite the most depleted roster in the NFL, and that is just absolutely devoid of talent. There's nothing on that offense. Everybody saying Bryce Young is a bust is just wildly off base because nobody could succeed in that offense. They have very, very, very little talent. Right. They did go 1-10 under Reich. So if it were any other circumstance, probably justified. But in this instance, when a player like Chuba Hubbard is arguably your best offensive player, when you went out and grabbed Miles Sanders in the offseason to be a running back one, and Chuba Hubbard ends up taking over for him, somebody who was already on the team. It's a wacky situation. I feel really bad with Frank Reich. Do I think Frank Reich is a terrific head coach? No. Do I think that Frank Reich deserved to get canned for the Panthers' inability to win games when they traded off their only offensive weapon in order to draft Bryce Young? No. So, moving forward, another coach that was canned, not a head coach, but an offensive coordinator. We have Ken Dorsey with the Bills. A lot of people were looking at Ken Dorsey like he was the reason that the Buffalo Bills were not winning games, and that Ken Dorsey's play calling was the problem. You know, because Ken Dorsey fumbled all the balls and he threw all the interceptions, and Ken Dorsey had all the drop passes and the miscues. It was very obviously Ken Dorsey's fault. Ken Dorsey deserved to get canned. This move made tons of sense to Bills brass. But kind of like the Frank Reich situation, Ken Dorsey did none of those fucking things, right? So Ken Dorsey was a strange firing, in my opinion. It's got to be because, maybe he didn't jive with Josh Allen. That's the only justification that I can come up with in my small brain, is that Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen didn't necessarily hit it off. There was some sort of a disconnect there. So the Bills brass dumped Ken Dorsey and, kept Josh Allen on that straight and narrow. There have been all the, the memes and the rumors and what have you that have come out that Josh Allen's turnoverable plays, or however that's actually said, is one of the best in the NFL. Most of their turnovers are not actually Josh Allen's fault. If you watch the games, he still makes a lot of boneheaded decisions. It's almost like Brian Daboll was able to reel in these poor decisions by Josh Allen more often than not, and that kind of kept Allen afloat. He makes some bad decisions. Are they all his fault? Definitely not. There are so many problems within the Bills that you can by no means blame any specific person. However, one of the people you should not have been able to blame is Ken Dorsey. So Ken Dorsey gets canned. They have a new guy step in, that new guy being Joe Brady. And the Bills are probably not saved, but they did get to save face by dumping Ken Dorsey. Not much information has come out of either camp since it happened. So you don't, know, it's all rumors, right? Like intrinsically, nobody actually knows what went on. We just know that Ken Dorsey got the boot, Josh Allen got the vote of approval, and Joe Brady has stepped in as the new offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. Moving on to the next coach firing and the final coach firing that we will be covering because it is the last one on the list. That would be Matt Canada with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This move was, 2 years in the making, give or take. The Pittsburgh offense has been predictable per Najee Harris. They've been lethargic. They've been incapable of moving the ball downfield at any sort of a legitimate rate. And so they fired Matt Canada, whose offensive playbook looked like a junior high school team's playbook. Do I think that this coach firing was warranted? Yes. Do I think that this is going to fix the Steelers? No, obviously not. We all watched them this week against the Cardinals. They got blasted by the Cardinals, albeit Kyler Murray's getting healthy, and that team has some semblance of a reinvigorated life to them. However, this didn't fix Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett might actually be a large part of the problem. It was not all Matt Canada, more than likely. Do I think Matt Canada was a good offensive coordinator? I do believe he would probably be better in the NCAA as opposed to the NFL. This is not going to fix the Steelers. I'm going to touch a little bit more on this situation here in a little bit towards the end of the show. But I do believe that Matt Canada being fired was coming. I do think that this was, in the making longer than it may have seemed, despite the fact that it seemed like it was never going to happen. I know a lot of Pittsburgh fans that were super excited when Canada got dumped, and then they were right back into the dumps when they lost to Arizona. So this is an interesting firing just because it was mid-season, and Eddie Faulkner has stepped into the role. And, this was his first game as OC. It kind of sucks that he and Matt Canada are friends. Like, it's a stab in the back that isn't real. It's an accidental stab in the back, right? Like, he had no want, I guess, or will to take Matt Canada's position. I highly doubt that was ever his intention. But he did end up taking the role. He had a piss poor game his first week as the OC. So Pittsburgh is definitely a team to watch. They are a fringe team for the playoffs, and it's really going to be important what they're able to do moving forward, especially since Kenny Pickett is looking at missing an extended period of time with the injury that he sustained against Arizona. So Eddie Faulkner has the cards stacked against him, and things in Pittsburgh are getting a little rocky finally. Again, I'm going to touch more on that here in a bit, so I'm just going to go ahead and stop it right there. Next, we have the hot seat. I have kind of covered most of this already. I've added some new names to the list, and some of these names that are on the list have reaffirmed the fact that there is no chance in hell that some of them should return. Right? We're going to start this list off with Riverboat Ron, just because I am a massive Ron Rivera fan. I have tons of respect for the guy. Loved him in Carolina. I have followed him most of his NFL career, but his tenure in Washington should be over. This is all speculation, by the way. There are no reports that are coming out that this is bona fide going to happen. However, there are reports that Ron Rivera probably should be fired, and I'm in full agreement with them. I just think that, maybe the NFL has evolved beyond the Ron Rivera age, or, maybe he doesn't jive with the personnel that they have there. However, Ron Rivera's tenure as the Washington football team's head coach should be coming to an end at the end of the season. Sam Howell looks to be regressing. They traded away their two best edge rushers, and it just seems like they're embracing that rebuild status, and Riverboat Ron needs to go with the old regime. So we are probably looking at a head coachless Washington football team, or Washington Commanders, whatever you want to call them, the ex-Skins, right? We should be looking at a team that's in the head coaching hunt here come the offseason, possibly coordinators. I'm not sure. If it were my decision, honestly, I'd fire the OC as well. Just kidding. But I think that they end up elevating Bieniemy. I don't like the way that Bieniemy doesn't use Terry McLaurin, and I'm really hoping that when he steps into that head coaching role, should that be the route that they take, that Terry McLaurin either gets traded or Terry McLaurin gets used like the wide receiver one that he truly is, because it's very disappointing when you have a guy that is a very incredible talent, like one of the top wide receivers in the league right now. And he's, garnering less than 5 targets a game. Like against the Dolphins, he had 0 receptions on 3 targets. The targets weren't good. And as said by Terry McLaurin, he ran a lot of cardio that game. Like that was the ultimate outcome. And it's disgusting when you have a guy with as much talent as Terry McLaurin does. Next on the list, and this one I have an asterisk next to just because it is kind of a 50-50. Right? You have Antonio Pierce with the Las Vegas Raiders. Nobody knows what the Raiders are going to do, but you have to look back at the Rich Bisaccia, I believe is how you say his name. I'm probably butchering it. But Rich Bisaccia gig, because he pulled in as the interim head coach when Gruden left, or when Gruden was, exiled by the NFL. He did an honorable job as the head coach of the Raiders. And then what did they do? They gave him the middle finger, a bottle of wine, and told him good luck on your travels. So Antonio Pierce has filled in. The players seem to really, really like him. and they're not going to go to the playoffs more than likely. So, because it would take virtually winning out for the Raiders to do anything specific, the Broncos probably have an easier path to the playoffs. We could possibly see Antonio Pierce lose his position as the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, which would put them back in the hunt as well. As a side note to this, if Jim Harbaugh were to leave Michigan, I think Jim Harbaugh probably ends up as the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. That is, again, purely speculation. And also, I'm a little biased because I'm a big Harbaugh fan, both brothers, but I like Jim a lot. And I think Jim Harbaugh's mentality would work very, very well in Vegas. And I think that the players would, accept him rather well. Do I think that Antonio Pierce should keep this job? Probably. I'm going to touch much more on this guy towards the end of the season, just because if he keeps winning games, there's virtually zero justification that you can pull out of a hat for firing him. So as we stand right now, I do think that it is more or less possible that we could see Antonio Pierce leave the Las Vegas Raiders, not by his wishes, and that they could be in the hunt for a new guy in the offseason. Moving forward, another name that I have mentioned before, I do think that Brandon Staley gets canned. He is the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, and I do believe that they probably move Kellen Moore as well. And what is essentially will probably be clearing the house of all the coaching staff. The Chargers are arguably the most, not even very arguably, but arguably the most disappointing team this season. It feels like the Chargers franchise is cursed. It's like them leaving San Diego just ruined it tarnished everything, and that curse has moved from San Diego to Los Angeles. There's no reason for this offense to be so inefficient. There's no reason for this defense to be so bad. They have amazing players in Los Angeles. They need to get something going. There's like a 1.2% chance that we see Brandon Staley keep the head coaching gig. They should have lost faith in him already. I defended this guy for the last couple of years. I really thought something was going to happen. He's a defensive-minded coach that can't call a defense, has no idea how to build a defense, has no idea how to develop defensive players, and they don't win games that they should win. So I really think that Brandon Staley is on his way out. I think that Kellen Moore has not done a great job as the offensive coordinator. If they were to can Brandon Staley and promote Kellen Moore to the head coach, I would be flabbergasted. There's no reason that should happen, and I could be being hard on Kellen Moore, but that offense is worse than it's been in years past since he took over the helm. And I just can't imagine LA doubling down on a guy that is just not getting the job done. Moving on, new name to the list, fun. We have Dennis Allen with the New Orleans Saints. The Saints should be better than they are. It's not to say that Dennis Allen has done a bad job. Derek Carr can't stay healthy. He seems to have lost the love for the game. And they've had multiple issues. Chris Olave has been in legal trouble. Michael Thomas is on the shelf. Like it's one of these things. Like Kamara missed the first couple of weeks. However, this is the NFL, next man up. And despite New Orleans being firmly in the hunt for a playoff position, the NFC South is more of a, somebody's got to win this rather than having any sort of a player that's just, playing football well. So I could see Dennis Allen on the hot seat. Out of all of the names on this list, I think Dennis Allen has the least probability or the lowest probability to get canned. However, it wouldn't surprise me if New Orleans were to move on from him this offseason and potentially go after Jim Harbaugh or maybe a flashier offensive name that has the potential to score points, right? Somebody that can build an offense, somebody that can jive with a younger quarterback. I do think that this is Derek Carr's last go here, and somebody who might just be a little more creative. The defense is good. It's stout. The offense is terrible. They can't get anything going. I think Jameis Winston needs to get the keys for the rest of the season just so they can see if he should be the starter moving forward so that maybe they can, build around him, use their picks on skill players and people that will commit to a team game rather than going after a quarterback and spending all this money. But we'll see, right? Dennis Allen shouldn't be a huge surprise if he gets canned. He'd probably be surprised, but the rest of us probably shouldn't. Do I think this will happen? I'm pretty 40-60 on this. 40% of me thinks that Dennis Allen gets canned. 60% of me thinks he gets retained. So that's that, right? Lastly on this list, and it pains me to say this, and there's an asterisk next to the first name, but Robert Salah and Nathaniel Hackett. The Zach Wilson situation was botched, severely bad. I just don't know if Bob Salah and Nathaniel Hackett will be around next season. I'd like to see Robert Salah retained, right? I like him a lot. I like what he's doing. I think that they went all in on Aaron Rodgers. That project ended 4 plays into this season. And I think that has just backfired in a big way. I think Nathaniel Hackett is a just shithole offensive coordinator. I don't think that Nathaniel Hackett should have a job as a coordinator next season in the NFL. I really went to bat for him with the whole Sean Payton situation, but honestly, it's starting to look like Sean Payton was right. Hackett is not good, and I think that because this offense is so inefficient, because the play calling is so ridiculous, that it honestly made Zach Wilson look worse than he actually is, and it led to this, pickets and pitchforks against Zach Wilson, when in reality, Zach Wilson was the most talented quarterback on this roster, and he's better than he looked, all because Nathaniel Hackett has no clue how to run an offense. Allegedly, right? He looked good with Aaron Rodgers, but so does anybody else, right? So I think Nathaniel Hackett gets canned for sure. I don't think that he comes back for Aaron Rodgers next season. And I'm very 50-50 on Bob Salah just because of the way all of this has been handled. Just because of the way the Zach Wilson situation has been handled. Just because of, all of it. I mean, Bob Salah came out for Zach Wilson, was like, we are not going to switch quarterbacks. We are not going to switch quarterbacks. We are 100% behind Zach. And then it probably from upper management, they were like, nah, bench Zach Wilson. And then he did, and we got a good look at Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian now. And, they're awful. They're not good quarterbacks. So I think Bob Salah probably gets the benefit of the doubt, but I really think that Nathaniel Hackett is or should be on his way out. Moving on, a little bit of less doom and gloom. That should be it for the coaching hot seats, coaching firings. The next topic is your Houston freaking Texans. So the Texans have looked really, really good. I know I've missed a couple of weeks of these shows, and I haven't really been able to touch on, most of what they've done great in the past couple of weeks. And like I said previously in the show, I am going to just kind of glaze over the top of the things that they have done just because they haven't been introduced on my show. And most of you follow the Texans, and y'all kind of know what they've been doing. So to kick our Texans portion of this show off, we did beat the Bengals 30-27 while they still had an injury-less Joe Burrow. That was pretty crazy. That was an awesome game. I definitely tuned in for every moment of that. It had me on the edge of my seat, just like what seems to be every Texans dub this year. But it was fantastic. We beat the Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray back. He was very newly back, and I don't think that the game should have been close as it was, but Kyler played a very, very, very good game considering the circumstances, and the Texans defense was able to hold out for a dub. So that one was really fun. Again, it had me on the edge of my seat, but we were able to pull it off, and that was mostly magical, to be honest. We took an L to the Jaguars and lost Titus Howard in the process, and this one hurt a little bit just because there was just bad officiating. I'm not going to say that the refs cost the Texans the win because there was bad officiating on both sides, but something that this season has been more symptomatic of for the whole league has been the piss poor officiating, and they really, really struck us hard against the Jaguars, again, on both sides. But there were some really bad calls made all game long for both sides, and it really it hurt the allure of the game, right? And there have been multiple games this season where the fans have been left scratching their heads and have been left in awe and just, more or less displeased with the product because the officiating seems to be so bad. There's more talks of rigging the NFL or scripting the NFL than ever before, and that is mostly due to just bad officials. It feels like the NFL would be hard-pressed to not address it in the offseason, right? Like, it would make sense to hire full-time officials. It's a multi-gazillion-dollar company, and it would only make sense to bring in full-time officials. I mean, college officiating has its problems, but college officiating is like 67% better against the average, right? So it's a math thing. Like, the officiating in the NFL is just so bad that statistically you would think that they would be more inclined to do something about it just to save face for the product than they would to leave it as the status quo and keep letting these clowns determine the outcome of games. That's just purely my position on this, but it just seems like that would be probably the best bet for them at this point. And then this most previous game, tonight is Monday night. Yesterday, the noon game, we played the Denver Broncos and won 22-17. Unfortunately, we lost number 3. Prayers up for Tank Dell. That was a huge loss, and as an ex-Houston Cougar, I know Tank Dell has become, like one of the go-to fan favorites. He is a big favorite of mine. I love his product on the field. He seems like a really good guy, and it hurts a lot to lose him. Luckily, we have Robert Woods and Noah Brown to fill in. We have John Mechie who can really step up, and we have the pieces to replace him. Next man up. But Tank Dell was going to be one of the only rookie receivers, if not the only rookie receiver, to surpass 1,000 yards this season. That would have been a huge deal, especially with CJ Stroud going off the way that he is. And it's a big blow. It's a morale blow. It's a productivity blow. It's a statistical blow. And it hurts. It's going to hurt the Texans franchise. We will not be the same team without Tank for the rest of the season. He fractured his fibula, I believe, is the final verdict on that. So again, prayers up for Tank Dell. Hopefully he has a speedy recovery. Hopefully he comes back at 150%. He's ready to blow and go next season. And we will all be waiting for him to return. Go Texans, right? With that being said, we're going to jump into kind of the few needs that I've observed, maybe some of the things that the Texans could reach out for in the offseason or in the draft coming up. We need an offensive tackle. Titus Howard is gone for the season. He has been more or less injury prone, more so since the contract somehow. But that, that's the way, par for the course, right? We need some sort of depth at offensive tackle that we can both rely on and that can play amicably well. We could use an edge rusher outside of Will Anderson. And don't take this the wrong way, because I absolutely love Jonathan Grenard. I loved him at Florida. I love that Houston drafted him, and he is having an amazing season. However, we need a better pass rusher opposite of Will Anderson. We need somebody that in the clutch moments can take the game in his hands and can really disrupt an offense. I know that we won, final seconds against the Broncos. They were right there about to score a touchdown. We were able to stop them. And that's been, kind of the situation more often than not this season. But it just feels like an upgraded edge rusher would give the Texans something that they very, very much need. Chase Young probably would have filled that hole really well. We probably didn't want to give Chase Young money. So edge rusher is something that I would hope that they look at either in the offseason or in the draft, probably in the draft. But at some point after the season is over, edge rusher should probably be addressed. We could use some safety depth. I know Jimmy Ward had the huge game-sealing interception against the Broncos. However, Jimmy Ward's also been injured most of the season. Jalen Petre's in the middle of a sophomore slump, so to speak. So having a little bit of depth would probably go a long ways for the secondary. And then lastly, probably running back. When we fired Cornell and we brought in D'Amico and we brought in this whole new scheme, it seems that Dameon Pierce has not adjusted well to the style of running that we need him to run at this point. And again, this is one of those, don't get me wrong, situations. I really like Dameon Pierce. I collect football cards. If you follow my card PC page, you'll see that. I think that Dameon Pierce is probably one of those guys that we could trade in the final year of his contract or this offseason, and we can pursue somebody that fits our scheme a little better, that can be a 1-2 with Devin Singletary a little better. It seems that Dameon Pierce is thinking too much, and it's not necessarily, this isn't the kind of offense that plays well to his skill set. And as much as I hate to say it, we should probably move Dameon Pierce and bring in somebody that is more used to the type of scheme that Houston is running now. But enough with negative Houston takes, which that's not what that was, but enough with Houston negative takes. A couple of team shout outs, just, over the last couple of weeks, and people that have played really, really well. The last couple of weeks, more or less also mostly against Denver, but quite a bit. Shout out to Derek Stingley. who has been fantastic with 4 interceptions in the last 3 games. That dude has been massive for Houston's defense. Hopefully his soft tissue injuries do not come back because our defense looks much better with him on the field. He resembles a lot of like a Jalen Ramsey for the Miami Dolphins. So Derek Stingley has been huge for us. He has played very well, and big shout out to Derek Stingley for being a dog. Juice Scruggs, who has filled in very, very well across the offensive line with the various injuries and the various problems that we have been having. He is a rookie, and he looks really good. I'm very happy to have Juice Scruggs healthy again and on the Texans squad because he looks like he could be a long-term starter for us. CJ Stroud, who just surpassed all other quarterbacks in the league for most pass yards in the NFL. You know, shout out to our rookie quarterback that might garner some MVP votes and should have offensive rookie in the bag. You are the face of the Houston Texans now, and we all love you. Will Anderson for being a defensive captain and a commanding presence on the field every single play. The dude has an insane motor, never stops, and has been our largest disruptor all season. I've absolutely loved Will Anderson. I wanted to take him with the 2nd overall pick. We didn't. We took him with the 3rd, which was even better. And Will Anderson has been amazing. And then one last one, Blake Cashman is a fucking dog and has been amazing for the Texans this year. He is all over the field. There shouldn't be a single Texans fan alive that does not love and appreciate everything that Blake Cashman has done. I hope he gets a long-term contract in Houston because he has played out of his mind and deserves another stint with Houston. At least 1, but hopefully 3. And now finally, more or less, the conclusion to the show. I'm going to run through a couple of things that have happened and things that are happening throughout the NFL. And then we'll jump into the path of the playoffs. We're going to try and run through that pretty quick, not trying to bore you guys for too long. However, so the Eagles lose to the Niners, right? Philadelphia lost to San Francisco yesterday in an embarrassing fashion. The game was not close, and honestly, the score was closer on the scoreboard than it actually was on the field. The Eagles looked lost the entire game. It looks like last year, you know, when Eagles fans were saying, oh, you know, even if Brock Purdy was on the field, right? Even if Brock Purdy was on the field, Eagles are going to smash the Niners. That was not the case. The 49ers had that number all game. These two teams will meet again, more than likely in the playoffs, unless the 49ers go on a big losing streak and Dallas takes over that 1 seed for the NFC East. And I'm here for it because the 49ers absolutely crushed the Eagles. If you know me, you know that the Niners were actually the first team I ever cheered for when I was a little kid before the Houston Texans franchise existed, which, you know, isn't saying much because I was a really little kid and I didn't, you know, barely knew what a football was. However, I loved this game. I love that it really seemed to put a highlight on the fact that maybe the Eagles really have been getting bailed out by the refs. And maybe the Eagles aren't quite as good as everybody was touting them to be. You know, they were winning ugly. But, you know, maybe there were other things at play. Right. So that's going to have big ramifications for the NFC. Namely, the Niners could end up taking that number 1 seed. The Eagles could end up seeding that, you know, top seed in the NFC East to the Cowboys if they went out and the Eagles were to lose 1 or 2 more games. I believe 2 more games. So this game was pivotal for the Eagles. They dropped the ball as hard as they possibly could, basically threw it at the ground. And now the NFC is more wide open than it has been at any other point in the season. Next little note. Why are the Chargers so bad? I've got these written out. So that's how I have this written. Why are the Chargers so bad? I covered the Brandon Staley situation. But a lot of the hate goes towards Justin Herbert. I do not think that Justin Herbert is as bad as people are making him out to be. He's had a defense that should have been a top 5 defense, you know, every year since he entered the league. They're not. And it's just so strange that the Chargers are so bad. I love Austin Eckler. It's unfortunate that Mike Williams is on IR. It's unfortunate that Josh Palmer is on IR. But even with them being out, their offense should be better. I think Kellen Moore is honestly the biggest problem in LA outside of Brandon Staley. But the Chargers should not be as bad as they are. And it is very unfortunate because they are in a very competitive division. And this of all years, they were primed to probably take the division over if they just didn't suck so bad. So I don't have a good answer, but I do think coaching is the problem with the Chargers, and look for the Chargers to rebound pretty hard next year. I think Justin Herbert and co could be really, really good. I think a change in staffing personnel is going to make a huge effect or a huge ripple effect for the Chargers organization. And I really think that the Chargers should be a major player next season. Moving forward, Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray has looked really, really good since coming back. He came back from the ACL tear right around when the new Call of Duty dropped. And as a funny little side note, he's gotten in trouble for it before. Kyler Murray looks super focused. He looks like he loves football again. I think this injury reminded him that he's human and that, maybe studying and practicing and really absorbing everything that's going on is the better bet as an NFL quarterback. And Kyler Murray looks fantastic. I cannot wait to see what the Cardinals do next season. They have a lot of picks, a lot of draft picks, and a lot of capital. And I think that the Cardinals should be able to turn some things around and, won't be the laughing stock that they may have been some of this year. I know that the Josh Dobbs story took everybody's hearts by storm and this, that, and the other, but the Cardinals have not been a very good team. And I think that Kyler, should he stay healthy, should he, fully commit to this, I think the Cardinals might actually be good next season, and I think that some of my takes on Kyler may look bad next year. And I'm for it. It's good for the NFL. I like that Kyler's playing well. I like that Kyler's elevating the players around him. Now, they did just lose Zach Ertz. He asked for a release. They granted him the release. I think Zach Ertz is going to go to Philadelphia. I think that's going to help that Philadelphia offense a lot. But that hasn't happened yet. They did lose Ertz. Trey McBride has looked really, really good in his place. I think that was why they were so willing to release him. Trey McBride's a stud. If you play Madden, Trey McBride is ridiculous on Madden, so that makes sense, right? But yeah, no, I like what Kyler's doing, and I think that the Cardinals may actually be on a path towards, goodness after this. So moving on, Joe Flacco's return. Joe Flacco was riding subway cars and hitting golf balls for a while. He's been gone for a while. And the Browns picked him up off the street. We're like, hey, dude, we would like you to play football again. And Joe Flacco, in his return, went 23 of 44 for 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, which if you were to just go pluck any individual person off the street, put them in pads and be like, here, do this. They could not do that. So Joe Flacco played really well. The Rams, blew the Browns out. It is what it is. I think Joe Flacco played really well considering how long he's been away from the game. And I think that he may actually be able to breathe life into this Browns franchise. Do I want that to happen? No. I like the Browns. I'm a closet Browns fan, but I need the Texans to make the playoffs. And the path to the playoffs has the Browns firmly in their place. So I need the Browns to not do well. Plus, it determines the draft pick that the Texans get. However, it is cool to see Joe Flacco back. It's cool to see him on a division rivals team. And it was really cool to see him not totally suck just walking in off the street. And then lastly, for this portion of the show, are the Chiefs done this year? I don't think that the Chiefs can turn this around. I think that the Chiefs' offensive woes are here to stay until the offseason at the minimum. I think that they did not invest enough in the wide receiver position to be good. And despite the fact that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football right now and can make any play from any part of the field on, any sort of footing that he may choose, it doesn't matter. I don't think that his receiving core is good enough to carry this offense, and their defense is not just this elite once-in-a-lifetime defense. And I think we could see the Chiefs drop in the first or second round of the playoffs. I don't think that they are a Super Bowl contender anymore. I have very little faith. Rashee Rice has been a bright spot. He looks good, but when you have the likes of Sky Moore and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and the other guys that are really, really struggling for virtually no reason, because Pat hits them right in the hands. But they're struggling for whatever reason, and I just don't think that it's a hole that Pat himself can climb out of. I don't think that the Chiefs are going to contend for a Super Bowl this year. I do believe that the Chiefs season is all but over. They'll make the playoffs, but I have no faith that they can beat any of the large players in the AFC, namely the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to be the best team in the AFC, barring some sort of cataclysmic setback or the Miami Dolphins figuring out how to put together a good game against a good team. I do believe that the Chiefs are not going to be massive players at the end of this season. Now, the final portion of this show is going to be the path to the playoffs, something that I've mentioned a few times this show already. But we're going to take a dive on teams that are either barely in the wild card or on the fringe of being a wild card team. I'm going to give you the schedule ahead of them for the rest of the regular season. And, just kind of little tidbits here and there. Not much. We're at the end of the show. We're about to wrap up. However, so you have the Colts, the Indianapolis Colts. They sit at 7-5 on the year right now. They stayed alive in the wild card hunt against a thriller against Tennessee. They won in overtime. And their remaining schedule is not that tough. So this is the biggest roadblock to the Texans getting into the playoffs, just because they have beaten the Texans once already this year. And the Colts play a Bengals without Joe Burrow. They play a Pittsburgh Steelers team without Kenny Pickett. They play an Atlanta Falcons team that can't seem to figure out that they're an NFL football team week in and week out. They play a feisty Las Vegas Raiders squad, and then they wrap their season up against the Houston Texans, which is probably going to end up being the most important game for the AFC South this season. They look like they could make a run. They should be able to win most or all of these games. I hope they lose to the Texans and the Texans win out and we get in. But from a very realistic perspective, the Colts have a very easy path to the playoffs. Moving on, the Los Angeles Rams. This is a team that I was high on earlier in the year. Matt Stafford got hurt. Cooper Kupp was hurt. And there have been so many things that have happened with the Rams that, a lot of people, myself included, lost a little faith in. But the Rams are very sneaky good. They just blew out the Browns, sans Deshaun Watson, right? The Browns have so much turmoil at the quarterback position. Amari Cooper left with a concussion early in the game, but the Rams just beat the piss out of the Browns, and the Browns are a playoff team. So, the Rams are back, man. The Rams look really good. Stafford looks really good. The Kyron Williams, the running back, looks really good. Puka is an absolute dog. So you mix that with a defense that's still top 10 in the league, and the Rams could be a sneaky player for the playoffs. They are 6-6 on the season right now. They do have a tough schedule ahead of them, but they could sneak into the playoffs and absolutely disrupt some playoff dreams for some teams. They play the Baltimore Ravens, then the Washington Commanders, and then the New Orleans Saints, the New York Giants, and then lastly the 49ers. And the 49ers beat them earlier in the year, but there's a chance they can win somewhere between 3 and all 5 of these games and sneak in and be that big disruptor, kind of like the Giants did the years that they toppled the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl. This could be a similar year for the Rams, should there, barring an injury setback or, barring just an absolute, like an internal crumble, the Rams could make a huge run for the playoffs. Next up, we have the Green Bay Packers, who are 6-6 on the season, and they are surging. They have won their last 3 games over Kansas City, Detroit, and the Chargers. They have the Giants, Bucks, Panthers, Vikings, and Bears left to go this season. It is not out of the realm of reason that the Packers could win out and have a good season, win their division, and Jordan Love could get a legitimate shot at the playoffs his first year as a starting quarterback, reaffirming the fact that he's probably going to get re-signed or extended or however you want to put that after they did away with his 5th-year option and they gave him a 2-year contract in its place. The Packers could do something this year. And if it looks anything like their game against Kansas City, despite the very, very bad officiating and the missed calls and this, that, and the other, they did look good. They look juiced up. They look excited to be there. And the Packers could, again, kind of like the Rams, be a huge disruptor to some of these teams that we think are just solidly in the playoffs and are, juggernauts, so to speak. Next up, this one breaks my heart to mention, but the 6-6 Broncos, who just had their hot streak ended by the Texans, but Sean Payton has seemingly turned that organization around. Russell Wilson is making some stupid moves like the pick to Jimmy Ward at the end of the Texans game. But the Broncos look significantly better than they did earlier in the season. That 70-point drumming by the Dolphins seemed to have really woken that organization up. It pissed Sean Payton off enough for him to be a good coach again. And the Broncos are on the bubble of the wild card and could be good. That the Broncos are a team that some of these good teams should not want to face in the postseason. And they play the Chargers, Lions, Patriots, Chargers, and Raiders to conclude their season. Again, like previously stated, they could win 3 to 5 of those games and make a huge run, and the Broncos could absolutely ruin the season for some teams that have been more or less better or better just outright all season than them. Second to last team I'm going to mention The Bills, who are coming off of a bye week, they need some magic and some luck, but they are on the fringe. It is possible that they could make it. This team has the hardest shot at the playoffs out of everybody I have on this list. And they have the hardest schedule. They play the Chiefs, then the Cowboys, then the Chargers, then the Patriots. Then they close their season out with the Dolphins. I do think that the Bills miss playoffs this year. If you have tuned into my show all season, you have heard me say that more than once. I called that in the preseason, but I do not think the Bills make playoffs. However, with a little bit of magic and a little bit of luck and some less than bad play by Josh Allen, anything is possible in the NFL. Any given Sunday, any team can do anything. And I do think that the Bills could possibly be a player for the wild card and maybe make a run at the Super Bowl. Do I think it's probable? No. Do I think it is possible? Absolutely. And then lastly, the last team that I have on this list are your Houston Texans. We have an easy is not the correct word. There are no easy schedules in the NFL. But we have a winnable schedule to run the gauntlet through the rest of the regular season. We play the Jets, the Titans, the Browns, the Titans, and the Colts. The Jets are having just a ridiculous amount of turmoil at quarterback. Zach Wilson should not want to return as the starter. There have been many rumors that have come out today that have stated that Zach Wilson does not want to come out as the starter after they decided to start Tim Boyle, who is possibly the worst NFL quarterback of all time, and then Trevor Siemian when Tim Boyle came out to play ahead of him. However, I think that's a winnable game. Jets have an amazing defense. Doesn't matter because they don't have any offense at all. So that one could be a dub. You have 2 games against the Titans and Will Levi. I believe that we have a better team, especially with Derrick Henry on the shelf. It's a concussion, so he should probably be back against us for both games. However, I think that our defense is better than their offense and our offense is better than their defense. The Titans should be good games. However, I do believe that the Texans could sweep the Titans. We have the Browns with either a 99-year-old Joe Flacco or some amount of their young quarterbacks in at quarterback. The Browns announced today that they aren't going to say that Joe Flacco will be the starter in the future, despite him just passing the eye test and obviously being the best quarterback on that roster somehow. So the Browns are a beatable team. Again, amazing defense. Top 5 defense, top 3 defense, however you want to call it. But I don't think that their offense is better than our defense. And I believe that the Texans can beat the Browns. I had this game circled on my calendar. I wanted to buy tickets to it when Deshaun Watson was still the quarterback. That is not the case. I think the Texans can take the Browns. And then, like I've already mentioned, because of the Colts being on this same list, the Colts to be the season closer might be the biggest game of the AFC South this season. And I think that if there were any game that the Houston fans are going to pack the stands for, that is going to be it, whether it is in Indianapolis or Houston. I did not do enough research to be able to tell you where that was at. I believe it's in Houston, but I could be a liar. So I do think that is going to be a hard game. The Colts always play us really, really well, dating all the way back to the beginning of the franchise. And that one has the biggest asterisk next to it for me for the Houston's remaining schedule. But every game is a winnable game. The Texans are playing really, really well. If we can contain Gardner Minshew and we can hold their run game to a less than meaningful stat line, I do think that the Texans can win out, and I think that the Texans could make it onto the wild card and possibly be a massive disruptor. I am biased naturally as a Texans fan, but it does seem viable that Houston makes the playoffs in some form or fashion with a rookie head coach who should be a shoo-in for coach of the year, with a rookie quarterback that should be a shoo-in for offensive rookie of the year. And I think that it's an incredible thing that Houston's even in the position that they are in. So I'm pulling hard for the Texans to make the playoffs. And that is the show, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and end it there. I will see y'all again very soon. I'm glad I'm feeling better, and I cannot wait to put out more content. Stay tuned. I should have the Joey McGinnis on my show very, very soon as he beats the flu that he got on purpose, that he did not have to be on this show. Thank you all very much for waiting patiently. I apologize for the delay. I love you all. Thank you all for being the best fans in the world. I am out.